might just go ahead and Stone Cold Stunner the whole Marvel Universe, starting with Spider-Man, swinging from what spiders can. Except he was the best goddamn thing in the whole goddamn movie. So Stone Cold Nerd Man might have to leave the Spider-Man alone. But apart from that, this is about to go down as we take on the entire critical community, including those at Rotten Tomatoes who've been talking trash for way too long. So, one of the top 10 reasons that people say, and remember, if I think that one of the criticisms, I'm talking about the criticisms you'd have from the fans, the fan backlash, the stuff you got from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes. As you know, I'll put up quotes from the critics. I do apologize. I'm going to put up quotes from the critics as we go along so that you can see what I'm talking about. You'll see it on the screen. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do the graphic as I'm recording right now. I'm going to challenge these top 10 criticisms and that you find in a lot of the reviews for Batman v Superman, and also along the way show how is Civil War any different, where I can. It's unfortunately Civil War, broadly speaking, is so forgettable to me because it's so. If it was the first Marvel movie I'd ever seen, then I might have more time for it. But now I'm saying that it's getting a little generic now. I like what Marvel do. I like that it's making kids happy. It's always good to make kids happy. But it's just not my, I'm entertained by other things. I like that as a light-hearted thing, and I'll go to any Marvel movie that comes along. But, I like something a bit more heavy-hitting, and I think that's what Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad were. We're going to start by trying to understand the low score. And this is the last thing I'll say before I carry on. With Batman v Superman, unlike with Suicide Squad, I kind of understood a little bit more of the criticism towards it. I understood a little bit more why a lot of people didn't understand it. I wish people would have given it another chance and gone to watch it again, because I think there was a lot there that they may have missed. I thought the reviews were nitpicking rather than actually critically engaging what the film was trying to be. So yeah, let's hopefully we'll bring out all of that. First, we're going to talk about the editing in the movie. The editing for the movie made it difficult to understand and was too long. And the movie was too long. Now, I'm going to take each of those points on one by one. So the editing makes the movie difficult to understand. Now, I understood this within the theatrical version of the movie, the theatrical kind of release of the movie. However, as I was watching the movie, what I realized is, though the editing, and especially when you see the extended version, the director's cut, you realize, well, okay, it's not just the editing, it's that they really cut out significant bits of the movie that would have helped the audience understand. But to me, I was able to fill in the gaps when I watched the theatrical version. So I did understand the critical reception, but I still felt people were nitpicking. I mean, I remember people were saying when the film came out, they didn't understand the whole... Oh, by the way, spoilers massive spoilers. So that this is going to be if you haven't seen Batman v Superman, I don't understand, because you're a comic book movie. I'm sure you've watched or you've seen the movie by now. But if you haven't seen it, there's huge spoilers in this. So in the desert scene, in the theatrical version, you didn't find out that the bodies of the terrorists in the beginning were burnt by the kind of Russian, the Russian henchmen of Lex Luthor, and so people didn't understand why everyone thought Superman was responsible for killing those people in the desert. Okay, so essentially, it skipped that very important part where the KG Beast, that's his name, who was the henchman of Lex Luthor, where he had burnt the bodies, and all we saw is that these terrorists had been shot by Lex Luthor's henchmen, and therefore people didn't understand why did they think Superman was responsible for the death or for the deaths of these terrorists, and they were like, it doesn't make sense. But to me, it was like easy. You fill in the gap. I almost knew that these bodies had been burnt, even by watching the theatrical version. And even if they hadn't, it was obvious that in some way the government just assumed Superman was there. He must have been responsible. He must be somehow responsible for the tragedy that unfolded and the killing of all these terrorists who had kidnapped Lois Lane. I think that's all you really needed to understand. I didn't think there was any big thing. So when it came to the editing of the movie, I really got how, people had a problem with it. I didn't understand why they had so much of a problem, because I didn't feel it was so bad that I was lost outside of the movie. It wasn't so jarring. You still could follow the general gist of the story, and especially, I think especially for me, as someone who knows how difficult it is to get a lot of things into a very, like a screenplay is what, like you have 100 and something pages, and you've got a short time, and then you've got to edit it down, especially like the Hollywood movies and the demands they make on you for the time constraints you have within which to be able to tell stories that possibly need more time to be told. They need you probably need 4 hours to tell a really excellent Batman v Superman story, and so I got where the critics were coming from with the editing. But one thing I did enjoy about the editing, because they said it kept going from place to place to place to place, and one thing I thought that was really good about it was that if you saw the way it unfolded and the way the story unfolded, even in the theatrical version, more so in the director's cut of it, it really was like a graphic novel, a DC graphic novel coming to life. And I've never seen that before cinematically. I really had not seen that before cinematically. Even in The Dark Knight, it still was adapting. It was close, but it was adapting material from a film, from a comic book, and translating it into film language. I felt like almost what Zack Snyder was doing was literally taking the pages of his own Elseworld story of the DC characters. And for any of those who don't know what an Elseworld is, an Elseworld in DC Comics is kind of like a what if in Marvel Comics. And essentially what that is where you take the characters, the normal DC characters like Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, but you slightly change the reality that they live in, so you can tell these kind of strange, stories, alternate world stories of how things might be if they were inhabiting a slightly different and alternate universal world. And I felt like that was what he was taking. Like the most famous one is the Elseworld, is the film that this the graphic novel that this film is based on, which is The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. So that's what an Elseworld comic is for, or a graphic novel is for anybody who doesn't know or isn't familiar with it. And Zack Snyder really managed to capture that, and I felt the editing almost lent itself to that that kind of storytelling that you do find in comic books, where it's like, you go from one page to another page, and it just keeps going back in this kind of crescendo, going from one story to another story, to from Wonder Woman's little patch of the story to Batman's little patch of the story, and bringing all these story elements together until finally they connect into one, and then you had the final kind of payoff at the end. So to me, it was an incredibly effective way of bringing the feel of graphic novels to life in cinematically. But I could understand from the point of a film critic and from the point of the general audience, and the general audience mainly enjoyed this film, by the way, but from the point of the general audience, that they might not have understood that if they'd never read a graphic novel. And so I understand the editing critique of Batman v Superman, but I also think one has to appreciate that in fact what Zack Snyder was trying to do, he was writing a love letter to the DC graphic novels that were kind of dark and a kind of very epic in scale. And that was what it was trying to do, and I think it did it quite effectively. And the editing lent itself well to that form of storytelling, which isn't the usual kind of editing that you'd have in a movie that was supposed to be, to run like how we expect a movie format to run. The critics say it's too long. I think it was too long. I agree with them wholeheartedly. I think this film is flawed. I think it's a flawed, fascinating movie. And you're going to hear me say that the flaws are they're very, very noticeable. But at the same time, I think one has to appreciate what the film was trying to do, and most of what it was trying to do, it did quite successfully, I have to say. But even where it failed, you have to appreciate what it was trying to do, which was something that I don't think has been seen cinematically before this time. And I think it was a really, really brave approach to a Hollywood blockbuster, especially. So it was too long, definitely too long. And this is why when people say, "Oh, you should have just released the director's cut in the cinemas," I don't think that would have helped. I think that would have made things worse if they had have released the director's cut in the cinemas. I think people would have been very just, I loved the film. I really, really loved the film. I was entertained from every bit I watched. And the first one thing, I'm just going to tell you a quick story. When I went to the cinema to watch the movie, The first time I went, I fell asleep. Sorry, the first time I went, I got in after the trailers, and I watched it, and I was sitting there thinking, oh my god, this is just, you know, because I was out there with knives drawn, waiting to throw the fire on Zack Snyder as well, because I was just like, I hate you after what you did with Man of Steel, what you did to Superman, and all the critics are saying this is terrible, and I know this is terrible. You've done it again, you've done it again, and I'm sitting there watching this movie with a friend of mine, and I'm just saying, like, looking at him, and I'm like, and he doesn't even like comic book movies. This guy didn't even like comic book movies at all. He hates them. Or not hates them, he just is really, really indifferent to them. I'm sitting there like, when is this film going to get bad? I'm looking at him like, when is this film going to get bad? And he's looking at me and said, this is supposed to be a bad movie? And he's like, no, I think it's all right. And we watched it to the end, and both of us came out of the cinema, and he was like, yeah, I don't really like it, but I don't like comic book movies in general, but as it goes, I don't see it as a bad movie. I thought it was, entertaining for what it was. I'm not interested in the subject matter. And I was like, wow, that's an excellent comic book movie. That's one of the best comic book movies I've ever seen. I can't believe Zack Snyder made a movie I like outside of Watchmen. And I thought, the only reason he made Watchmen good is because he basically just ripped it straight from the comic. And I like the comic, so I like the film. And the visuals were amazing. So I didn't understand what people's problem was. And then I went to watch it a second time. And this time I went to watch it with the trailers from the beginning. And I was still enjoying the film. But by the end of it, last 20 minutes, probably one of my favorite bits, when the Trinity are fighting together, I'd fallen asleep. And I was enjoying it, and I'd fallen asleep. It was too goddamn long. It was too goddamn long. And I think if they really, really wanted to do it, I don't know how they could have done this, but if they wanted to release like the 3-hour version of it, I think they should have just done it 2 parts. I can't think of any other way they could have released that 3-hour version. Just done it in 2 parts, and leave it at that, because I thought the 3-hour version, the director's cut, I love it. Every moment of it, I watch it, I love it, but usually I have to watch it in 2 parts because I get a little bit tired watching the movie. And that's the honest truth, even to the Batman v Superman fans. That's my honesty. I told you I'm going to shoot from the hip. I'm going to be real in this video, and I'm being real. So that's the editing, okay? There were problems with it, okay? But this is why I'm going to explain why this movie isn't 27%, okay? It's not a bad movie, and it's better than Civil War. See, the thing is, I fall asleep with Civil War, and I'm not even enjoying the movie. That's the difference. Long movie. I think about the same runtime. This film has no humor, and it's too dark. Not enough action. Well, Kurt Russell, what do you have to say about that? Exactly. Okay, so to be honest, right, like the no humor, too dark, and not enough action. This one really angered me because if you're going to be critical of a film, I'm not going to go into Schindler's List. This film never suggested it's going to be light and humorous and funny. There was nothing in I mean, apart from when they started making them feel fear that if they didn't have a little bit of humor peppered in here and there, that you know, people weren't going to respond well to the trailers and not come to the movie. So they put in a couple of jokes which were bad and shouldn't have probably been in the film because they were distracting. And I think actually Lex Luthor brought enough humor to the movie anyway. But anyway, forget about that. But this angered me because I don't go to a film like Schindler's List and start saying, well, you know, I don't like that movie because it's too dark and it's too realistic and it's got no humor. The reason I don't do that is because Schindler's List didn't say that it was supposed to be light-hearted. It never, you know, presented itself as to be something full of humor. So why would you be critical of a movie for not having a light enough tone to it? As a critic, it doesn't make any sense. You criticize a movie for what it's trying to be and show how through what it's trying to be, it fails. You don't criticize a movie for what you, as an audience member, or you, as a you know, as a film critic, want it to be. And as for not enough action, the action in this movie is far superior to Civil War. The action in Civil War is so cartoonish, so over the top, you know, just ridiculously moronic, and yet has no stakes. You know, no one dies, no one, you know, not that I'm saying anyone should die, I'm just saying, like, I'm comparing the way the action works. You know, the action in Batman v Superman makes sense, it's grounded, and it's brutal. There's not one action scene in in Civil War that has I'm sorry, you can say that big action scene with Ant-Man, and I loved when Ant-Man grew big as well, and I loved when seeing Spider-Man get in the mix with, you know, Captain America and all those guys. But you know, there's not one action scene that can hold a candle to that Batman scene in the warehouse, and everyone knows it. Everyone knows it, right? There's no action scene that can hold a candle to the Batman, you know, in the Batmobile, just mowing through cats, driving through boats, just amazing action, amazing, incredible action. And what I appreciate about the distinction between the action, and I'm not saying I did not enjoy the action in Civil War. Do not get me wrong with what I'm saying. I'm saying the action in Batman v Superman is more sophisticated, it's more intelligent, it's more visceral, and therefore I enjoy it more. The action for me in The Dark Knight is better than Civil War. You know, it's more stylized in Batman v Superman, and yet at the same time more grounded. Look at how Batman faces Doomsday in the movie. Look at the difference between how Batman has to respond to Doomsday, to the threat of Doomsday, in comparison with how you know, the Avengers in Captain America Civil War, they respond to each other. Like, everyone can somehow take on everyone, you know. It's just completely ridiculous. Like, you've got humans, like human level characters like Hawkeye, and that dumb bird character. I don't know what his name is. Anthony Mackie. You've got someone like even Ant-Man, who's kind of strangely, I don't know why his power of getting small is so effective. Or Black Widow is the one that pisses me off the most. I mean, this is a human woman, okay? And this is nothing against women. Obviously, you can be very tough, and if you're trained well enough, you could take down most any man. But when these characters start going up against Vision, doing shit against essentially a being who is on the same level as Superman, and these guys can fight them somehow. How? When she's going up against the Chitauri, an alien force that is from space, and somehow taking shots at Loki. It's all of this stuff, all of this cartoonish things where I know what it is. I know exactly what it is. It's like the actors are like, oh, in my contract, I want my character to be cool, because that's going to help my film career. It's the same thing as with the guy who played Hawkeye, who's one of the most boring characters in comic book history, and in the films is one of the most boring characters. And he's like, oh, I want more time. I should be given more lines. I want more lines of these jokes so that my character can develop, because that's what character development is, saying, funny jokes, having little lines of dialogue, that little zingers or whatever. That's to them what character development is. So he says, I'm sure this is why that all of them are so spectacular in their action scenes, no matter what. They say, oh, I want to be able to, we all have to be able to take shots at each other, no matter what kind of power level we are. It's like somehow Black Widow can take on, Iron Man somehow. I don't know how, but she can do it, or Spider-Man. Or Paul Rudd can, Ant-Man can hang with Spider-Man, even though Spider-Man's, got all kinds of powers that shouldn't allow that to happen. It's too cartoonish and unrealistic, and also there's no stakes. They're not even, essentially it's a sparring match. They're not even trying to hurt each other. The whole thing is absolutely absurd. And then these guys come in. I'm sorry, I'm going to go into this more in the Civil War part of where I go into why I think the 10 reasons I think Civil War is not as good a movie. It's completely overrated, completely overzealous. The way the critics are pouring on accolades to this movie. So they're going on about this accord that they have, where the government are concerned about them, the way they're using their powers and how they're irresponsible with using their powers. And basically, in this half-hour long, I don't know how long it is, 26 minutes or something like that, sparring match that these super-powered beings have with each other, they just destroy a whole airport. Somewhere in the world, they just destroy a whole airport in a sparring match. They're not even trying to hurt each other. They're not facing a bad guy even. As much as I hate the Man of Steel, at least Superman, when he was just destroying public property and killing people in the process, but was actually trying to save the world from a villain. These guys are just fighting each other. They don't think, maybe we shouldn't throw a plane at the other person because somebody built that plane and it's not our property to destroy. They all should have been arrested for vandalism. Essentially, they all committed criminal acts. They just took buses and whatever it was and threw it at each other. Now, am I saying they shouldn't have had a fight in an airport, and maybe if one of them got thrown in to a car or something like that, that's absolutely fine. There was nobody in the airport, as far as I know. I don't know why there was nobody in the airport, but that's absolutely fine if they got thrown in. But they're literally taking stuff and throwing it and purposely destroying public or private property after they've just been told by the government, and Tony Stark is championing this idea that they should be that they should have some kind of limitations or restrictions on what they do, and they're just going around destroy. And it's not like it's the Captain America side that's doing it. It's the Tony Stark side that's doing it. They're just going around just destroying something that isn't theirs. So anyway, it's all cartoonish, ridiculous. The logic is completely off. It makes no sense. And if you want to nitpick, you can see how I just nitpick, because I could have just sat there during Civil War and been thinking about all these things rather than sit down and just try and enjoy the bloody movie, which is what I actually tried to do, even though I didn't enjoy it that much. But I actually sat down and I attempted to try and enjoy it and ignore all these things that were niggling in my head, and I was thinking, what? That doesn't. Why do they all have the same superpowers? I thought, they all seem to be like agility, and why is it that somehow all of them seem to be able to take on Vision, even though he's like this completely OP, overpowered kind of being? Why is it that, I sat there and I still just tried to sit down and take the characters in and enjoy the movie. You guys that are on the other side, the Marvel side, or the Batman fans, and I'm not just saying it's Marvel fans, it's the Batman fans, you sit down and you watch Batman vs Superman and you want to tear it apart, everything, because you're scared of other DC characters. Like the Batman fans are scared of other DC characters because they always want Batman to be the number one DC character, and the Marvel fans are scared of all the DC characters because they always want Marvel to be the number one, comic book movie making company, Disney Marvel. So anyway, that's my side of that. Cartoonish as hell, and the difference is, if the Marvel guys had have directed the Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Doomsday fight, they would have had Batman, because Batman's the most popular character, and how they treat Iron Man. Somehow Iron Man can take out the Hulk for some reason. I don't know how he can take out the Hulk like that, but he can take out the Hulk. So they would have had Batman somehow, be able to take down Doomsday, and he's got some weird kind of thing where he'll be able to do that. But in the what Zack Snyder did is he treated the action scenes with a certain amount of respect and logic, and showed that, okay, there are limitations to Batman. He cannot just take out anyone and do anything he wants the way somehow. I don't know how, but now Iron Man is just so OP. He can take out Hulk. He can go toe to toe with Thor. All of these guys he could do these things with. He's so OP, and so is Captain America. To be quite frank, I didn't know, like in the comics, Captain America can be holding helicopters. Like he's only supposed to be like a little bit stronger than human beings, like your average athletic human being. He's not supposed to be able to like grab He's not like the Hulk or Spider-Man. Spider-Man's supposed to be stronger than Captain America. But anyway, forget all that. That's all nonsense anyway to be talking about. That's getting into nerdy stuff, and it's nitpicking the way you guys usually do. So anyway, that's the Whew. So we're going to go into three. Depiction of Superman is bad. He kills. Does he? Now, I've not appreciated what Zack Snyder has done with Superman. I think I've been very vocal on the fact that I don't really like Batman. Sorry, I really don't like Man of Steel. I think it's an awful, awful movie, and I think that's what began this terrible slide into what has been a depiction of Superman, which I'm very, very uncomfortable with. The movie broke my heart many times, as Superman is probably my favorite superhero. I kind of like the Trinity equally. It's hard for me to pick whether Wonder Woman or Superman or Batman. I like them quite equally. But when Superman said, I might have to kill Batman, I might have to kill him, and then said the words, not everyone, I can't remember the exact quote, but he says, eventually everyone turns bad or something, or eventually everyone's corrupted. No, Superman, you're goddamn Superman. You don't say that. And these are the things where the film itself opened itself up to kind of critic, because you want Superman to be the hope of the movie. Even if you want it to be realistic, I get that, Zack Snyder, but you want Superman to be kind of hopeful in this movie. So don't think for one moment those who have issue or take issue with this movie, I don't see some of what you're saying. I see a lot of what you're saying with Batman v Superman, much more than I do with Suicide Squad. So the depiction of Superman is bad. I want to say one thing though about the bit where he supposedly kills a guy in Batman v Superman. Now he says in the next scene that he didn't kill anyone there. I don't know if he says he's not killing the terrorists or if he says he didn't kill anybody there. But I feel from that scene that we should probably give Superman the benefit of the doubt, because what he does is he moves so fast through that wall that I imagine he could have protected and shielded the terrorist that he smashes through the wall. Maybe he just wanted to give him a real fright, to be like, hey, you know, I'll fuck you up if I want to, if you're messing with my girl. And he may have smashed with his back through those walls rather than smash the guy face first into those walls. Because I would be very uncomfortable if Superman really did just smash the guy through the wall. I've never known. I'd like to ask Zach what his interpretation of that scene was. So on number 3, I'm with fans and critics. I do not enjoy the depiction of Superman. But what I would say is that does not make this a bad movie. Just because the Superman in this movie is not the ideal Superman that I want, I am not going to criticize the film on what I wanted it to be. I'm going to be critical and review the film on what it was trying to be itself. And I believe that what this was trying to do was a deconstruction of Superman, of the kind of perfectness of this character, that he could be this beacon of goodness in the world. They were trying to show a flawed a man with a great deal of power, and the struggles that he would have to go through. So in terms of the depiction of Superman, I think it served the film that Zack Snyder was trying to make. So I'm not too difficult on that, even though it's not my Superman, and I would have preferred a slightly more heroic Superman. So I'll give you guys that. The Superman was not the greatest. Too many characters in the movie. I don't think there were too many characters. I followed the characters quite easily. I followed the story arcs quite easily, even in the theatrical version. I think it's nitpicking again by the critics. I don't see the real problem. How were there too many characters? It was Batman, it was Superman, a few cameos here and there. Wonder Woman cameo. Wonder Woman was brilliant, badass. Really enjoyed every moment she was on screen. What's with the too many characters? Explain to me. Number 5, Lex Luthor. Bad casting. So yeah, Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor's cast as Jesse Eisenberg. Everyone thinks that's bad. Everyone thinks the casting was bad, that he was a terrible Lex Luthor, that he was the worst part of the movie, etc., etc. Now, let me give you a little preamble. As I told you, I was ready to trash. I was so incensed by the time I went into Batman v Superman. By the time I purchased my ticket to go into Batman v Superman, I wasn't even going to go to Batman v Superman, the movie. I wasn't going to go and watch it until they announced that Wonder Woman was in it. And then I was like, okay, now I've got to support this movie, because if I don't support this movie, they might say, oh, it's maybe because it's Wonder Woman was in it, maybe because people responded to Wonder Woman. You know, I didn't want it to be one of those things, so I had to go and support my girl. But anyway, as anything with Wonder Woman in till the end of time, until even if the movie is bad, like the next Wonder Woman movie is bad, I'm still gonna go watch it, because I need them to know that even if it's bad, it's not because there isn't Wonder Woman fans out there. It's because their movie was bad. That you know, Wonder Woman's awesome. Anyway, but put it this way: when I found out that Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, I went on a rampage online. You've got to see some of it. I went on, like, it was rants, hatred. There was vitriol, real vitriol in these kind of rants that I went on, and I felt sick. I couldn't sleep. I could not think at the time of a worst casting. It was like, to me, Ben Affleck was like George Clooney without any charisma. You know? And I'm not a huge fan of George Clooney, but I can at least watch his movies. I didn't like Ben Affleck. I mean, I didn't like the guy as an actor. I thought he was a wonderful human being, but I thought he was a very, very vanilla as an actor. I didn't think he was going to do a great job, and I thought he was going to rob us of a great new interpretation of Batman, which could have come from a superior actor who may have taken a few more chances. Okay, and I'm going to say something about Batman as well, because I hear all this stuff that Batman is, or the Batfleck, Ben Affleck is the best Batman ever. And I really, really strongly disagree. But I think he was really good in this movie, great in this movie. But best Batman, come on, guys, calm down a bit on that shit. Everything new is the best nowadays. I don't know why, like, everything new that comes, like Civil War, it's the greatest comic book movie of all time, and then by the time the next one comes out, they'll start dissing Civil War and saying, oh, it was all crap, and and it's, you know, like this, that, and the other, and they didn't quite nail Spider-Man. You know, every time something new comes out in this generation, they start trying to make their new thing the best one ever. No, no, no. Ben Affleck is not the best Batman. Straight up. He ain't got the capability, but he did surprise me. He shocked me a lot at how good he was. So I just thought I couldn't be more offended anyway. This is the narrative. I thought that you know, and then they announced Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, and I was like, I was so tired. I was so dispassionate by then. I was so off this movie because I already knew Wonder Woman was in it, right? But they cast Gal Gadot, and I was kind of like, give her a chance, who cares? You know, it really was like Ben Affleck's Batman. I mean, you might as well, like, whatever, you know, because I just didn't think there was anything else. And also, you know, I was really against all this kind of body shaming that people were doing against her. I thought it was pretty juvenile. Oh, she doesn't have big enough titties to play Wonder Woman. And that's so against the bloody character anyway. For all those people who were saying that, that's so against the message of the character. Like, Wonder Woman would be like ashamed of like fans who would say, like, if she was real. Of course she isn't. Is she? But you know, all that body shaming. So I kind of came to support Gal Gadot a bit, even though I was like, maybe you could have found like an actress who'd done more than the Furious Fast Five. You know, you can't give her something, you know, a bit lesser, so to actually test her out. Can she carry her own movie? I was worried about the acting, her acting. I was not worried about her body type. I thought she could beef up with the John Jones or whatever they do, or Jim Jones thing that they do, that routine that Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill went on to beef up for the roles as Superman and Batman respectively. But anyway, so that's the narrative so far, right? So I'm kind of really thinking that sorry about that. I'm really thinking that I can't hate on there wasn't enough hate within me to get any more angry at this movie. And then I woke up one day and the news was, because, you know, and I knew it wasn't a joke this time. I knew it wasn't a joke. I'd heard things that, you know, that they said that Joaquin Phoenix might be playing Lex Luthor, and I was like, oh, cool, Joaquin Phoenix, because Lex Luthor being the bad guy, the main bad guy of Superman, who's one of my favorite superheroes, so he's really, really one of my favorite villains. And I thought, whoa, Joaquin Phoenix, especially the way he played the bad guy in Gladiator, I could really see that would be incredible to see that. You know, his take on Lex Luthor and what he did. There's this other movie he did, The Master, and where he just freaked out. He was just like some crazy guy, like complete psychotic, and he just, what a performance, you know, he was nuts. And I just thought, wow, if he took on Lex Luthor, he could do something that we had never seen before of the character. And I still wish they had have cast him as Lex Luthor, but like they should have given him anything he wanted to play Lex Luthor. I think that would have been money very, very well spent, and nobody would be complaining now. But instead I wake up and I find out Jesse Eisenberg has been cast as Lex Luthor. And I'm like, the Social Network guy? What, just because he played a billionaire before? And I knew it wasn't a joke, because when, as I said, when Ben Affleck got cast, I was like, Jesus Christ, this is a joke. Like, it took me a whole 2 hours to finally believe that it was real news. I kept searching for where they were saying, oh, it's a prank, when it was Ben Affleck. But now I was like, okay, anything can happen. And when I saw, Jesse Eisenberg, Lex Luthor, it's not Joaquin Phoenix, it's Jesse Eisenberg, Zombieland, Jesse Eisenberg. Of all the people, and it wasn't, and I remember at the time people kept saying, oh, but he looks so young, and I thought, what a cool idea when it was suggested by Zack Snyder, even though I thought Zack Snyder couldn't pull off these great ideas that he always has. But I thought, what a cool idea to have a young Lex Luthor, like a Lex Luthor who's one of these kind of like young Harvard, kind of Silicon Valley, billionaires, made it by himself because he's just such a genius. And then he finds, that's a really, really interesting take on Lex Luthor. And so I had no problem with a young Lex Luthor. But Jesse Eisenberg, I was like, wow, they managed to do it. This makes Ben Affleck's casting as Batman look bloody genius. I was like, awful. So by the time, and I was so taken away by vehement hatred of this idea of Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. Once again, I couldn't sleep. As Edward Norton said. Yes, once again, I couldn't sleep. I just, I was like, okay, this is when this movie comes out, I'm gonna tear it apart. I'm gonna watch it, and I'm gonna come back, and I'm gonna rip it to shreds. I knew everything about this movie was gonna be awful, dreadful, the worst thing I'd ever seen. And I thought that this casting was perhaps going to be the worst thing of all. And then I went to the cinema after I couldn't sleep for months. And I was so depressed I couldn't even make a video when they announced it. I couldn't sleep, as I said. And then I went to the cinema, ready to see this awful abomination of a performance. That I was, from Ben Affleck I was pretty sure Ben Affleck was going to be pretty average. Like, he's just, what he always does. He's always like serviceable, but he doesn't do anything interesting. And I was pretty sure that, Jesse Eisenberg was going to be Jesse Eisenberg, which I like Jesse Eisenberg, but I just like him being Jesse Eisenberg in those comedies, and every once in a while maybe he can take on a slightly serious role, but he's Jesse Eisenberg. And man, I went to the cinema and I'm watching it, and I see the first scene of him, and I listen to the writing, because the writing of Lex Luthor in this Batman v Superman is absolutely brilliant. And I see this guy play Lex Luthor, and yeah, he's a bit ticky and he's a bit weird and but people are saying this guy is not. Look, let me put my cards on the table. I thought Jesse Eisenberg's performance in Batman v Superman, some of his scenes, not all together, because some of his scenes, I get what people are saying, are a bit too ticky, a bit too weird. But once again, I think people are way over exaggerating this. And what he pulls off is one of it. To me, him and Gal Gadot did the best job in the movie. I think his performance as Lex Luthor to me was more interesting than Henry Cavill as Superman, and a little bit more interesting and more actually, in a weird way, comic accurate, but this is in the writing, not in the performance, but more comic accurate than Ben Affleck as Batman. I think Jesse Eisenberg did an outstanding job as Lex Luthor, especially in some of the key scenes. I think some of the places he was doing his little tick things and little crazy things, but I think generally speaking, apart from when he went a little bit too manic, he was nailing, and even more so than his performance was the dialogue. The dialogue of Lex Luthor. That was the most Lex Luthor dialogue I have ever heard in any, specifically in this media. I mean, Chris Terrio, you are bloody genius, and people will. One day, people are going to understand just how good what you did was with the writing there. The writing there was exceptional. It was absolutely exceptional. I'm going to show you a scene. The scene on the rooftop. Let's watch this together, because I just have to break this down because it's that good. My God, that is a brilliant scene. It's so brilliant. I don't even. And then these fanboys are they so annoy me because they think they know what they're talking about and they know bloody nothing. Oh, it's too much like the Joker. Oh, he's playing the Riddler. He's not playing Lex Luthor. Let me explain something to you. Lex Luthor is not a thing, okay? Neither is the Joker, okay? The Lex Luthor is... There are three things that are true of all Lex Luthors that have come along. He's a genius. He's got a very scientific mind. And he hates Superman because he's jealous of the fact that Superman has this power that he hadn't earned. It's just a power, essentially godly powers that he hadn't earned through any effort of his own. It's just given to him as by nature. And as far as Lex Luthor is concerned, that power ought to be his. And that power, he knows that if he had that power, he'd be corrupted. So he thinks Superman must be corrupted. That simple. That is all that Lex Luthor is. Any way that a writer chooses to depict those three central themes, Lex Luthor's feelings towards Superman, which I've just outlined, the fact he's a genius and has a kind of scientific mind, any way a writer chooses, I could write a Lex Luthor who was a 7-year-old child who was just a genius, so brilliant as a 7-year-old, so way beyond that he's almost got the mind beyond adults, and then Superman comes along and he feels that somehow that you can take Lex Luthor any which way you want. You can make Lex Luthor a woman, as long as you keep those essential parts of the character. And what they've cleverly done here, and I do get it, sometimes he went over the top and it maybe didn't suit the tone of the movie, but remember this, just a short in between. If they had have gone with the suave, businessman, thoughtful, stoic Lex Luthor that you had in the animated series and that you had in Smallville, which is what most of these supposed comic book fans are referring to when they say, oh, I know who Lex Luthor is and I know what he's supposed to be like and he's not supposed to be like that. If they had have gone with that, how would you distinguish Lex Luthor from Bruce Wayne? They would have been almost identical. It would have been very, very hard to make that kind of stoic version of Lex Luthor be so different from the Bruce Wayne you had in this movie. They would have been virtually the same character, and the tonally it would have been these three boring white guys, like Superman's stoic and whatever, and then you have Lex Luthor, who's just a little bit of a genius but still stoic, and then you've got Batman, who's damaged and crazy and stoic. You couldn't have had that. So you had to have Lex Luthor have a different vibe. And what they did is they went with the birthright Lex Luthor, and I'll show you now, they went with the version of Lex Luthor that you find in Red Son. So now you can see what I'm talking about when I say that this was a Lex Luthor that we've seen in comics. You can see from that Red Son clip that this is a version of Lex Luthor that we've seen from the comics. So it does not stray far. It was very, very comic related. And I thought what was interesting is people say this guy was like the Joker. He was trying to pull off a Heath Ledger, like Dark Knight, because he was twitching a little bit. People don't understand. They actually switched around what would be expected of these characters. They did a very clever thing with Lex Luthor and the Joker, because they've always been, much like Superman and Batman, two sides of the same coin. So they made the Joker in the Dark Knight, they made him a psychopath. Now, there's a distinction between a psychopath and a sociopath. They've made Lex Luthor in this movie a sociopath. Now, with a psychopath, what you have is a person much like, if you're familiar with, these kind of psychopath serial killers, or these people who've been diagnosed with psychopathy, like Bernie Madoff. You have the kind of sophisticated, not sophisticated. You have somebody who is charismatic and able to hide under a veil, essentially, of sanity, and be able to charm people and lead people and manipulate people very, very effectively, because of how socially adept they are, how able to mirror normal people's behavior that they are, and how charismatic they are. Now, what in the Dark Knight, what the Joker was almost a Charles Manson, was a very, very good example of a psychopath, somebody who was able to lead other people because of his extraordinary charisma. Okay. And lead them to do savage things, and convince them of bizarre philosophies and bizarre ideas, because he was so, he knew people and was able to read people and profile people and use that kind of against them. Then and someone like Ted Bundy is very, very similar in that sense. Then there's the other type, which is the sociopath. Now, the sociopath is more, and you can look this up, the sociopath is more like Ed Gaines. This is a guy who stands out. There's something wrong with him, and people know it. They can see it. They may not, this is a guy, when he turns around and you find out that he, killed a couple of people, people aren't surprised. They may not have been like, oh yeah, that's definitely, that guy's a killer. But when they find out about it, they're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. That guy really did seem like he was screwed up. Yeah, Yep, that's the one. And that's what Lex Luthor is in this. Lex Luthor is that type of guy. The senator finds out Lex Luthor is responsible for doing some weird criminal stuff, and she's like, yeah, I pretty much figured. Everyone who finds out about Lex Luthor, even the general who finds out about Lex Luthor, who gives Lois Lane the smoking gun to tell her that what Lex Luthor has been up to. Even he's not surprised that Lex Luthor is, he's that type of person. He's a sociopath. He's so mentally unstable in terms of his behavior that people notice it. And they notice that there's something wrong with him. They notice his distance away from the rest of humanity. But the great thing about this is he's the kind of sociopath who's more like, I would put him in the kind of same level as the Unabomber. Yeah, the Unabomber, exactly. Ted Kaczynski. This guy was a genius. Brilliant genius. Went to Berkeley College and just was mathematically so gifted, but he could not make or form relationships with people because he was just such a genius, and it brought him and it distanced him further and further and further away from society, and he started sending out bombs to Berkeley because he felt rejected by them. Eventually it was his brother who, read some kind of manifesto he sent to a newspaper, and his brother turned him in. He said he read this manifesto. So his own brother wasn't surprised that that Ted was was this kind of murderer, serial kind of killer guy. His own brother was like, recognized it and was like, yeah, that's probably Ted. That's the kind of sociopath that Lex Luthor is playing. That's the kind of nuance that that Jesse brings to this performance, and he uses all these kind of philosophical musings and references, and like when I love that bit on the roof. Yeah, and he does that. And it's like you can see the wheels turning in his head, but Superman has no idea what he's talking about. What's he talking about? You send something to Batman, and it's like you killed your family and blah blah. But all of that is a brilliant master plan to get these guys to in the end to come into conflict. So this guy is a real genius, and when you look at the plan that he has, even the Granny's peach tea. When you look at the plan he has, it was very Lex Luthor, and I mean, as much as I will defend Jesse Eisenberg's performance, I do think other people could have done this a little bit better. But I think Jesse Eisenberg, I thought he was good. I thought he was very good. And he surprised me a hell of a lot, probably more than anybody in this movie. The only thing I enjoyed more than him was Wonder Woman. And I liked him because he was the type of villain you really hated. I didn't like this guy. And that's what you're supposed to feel towards Lex Luthor. The Joker's a kind of villain that you like. And I think that's another thing that people are mistaking their feelings towards Jesse Eisenberg with this, because they feel like, with the Joker you kind of like him, and with the other DC villains you kind of like them, and you should kind of want to like Lex Luthor. But Lex Luthor isn't that type of villain. Lex Luthor's just a twat. He is the most superficial, this is a guy who, if he put his mind to it, could cure cancer, could rob the world of rid the world of so many ills and iniquities, You know, you just saw him when in that Red Sun scene where he's just like, oh, here's the thing to balance the budget. You know, uh, that's the kind of guy he is, and he could do that anytime he wants. But instead, he's just so obsessed with some guy because he's the only guy in the world who's superior to him. This is a petty individual, and you know, Jesse Eisenberg made him even more despicably hateable. At least in the comics, he kind of find him a little bit like, that's quite cute the way he just hates Superman like that. That's quite funny. But this version is like, I straight up did not like him. I had a distaste for him. Every time he came on screen, he made my skin crawl, and I liked it. I like that. That is a very, very different and interesting take on Lex Luthor, and we've got to stop thinking that these comic book, we have to stop with this entitlement. Oh, we have this idea, it's got to be Bryan Cranston. If it isn't Bryan Cranston, then it's shit. You've got to stop with that entitlement. It's bullshit. You know, sometimes these guys get it wrong. Sometimes maybe even this they got wrong. Maybe it's so irritating that people can't deal with Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. But when you start saying the writing was bad and he was like the Joker and all of this kind of thing, it just makes me feel you don't know what you're talking about. You either haven't read the comics, because that is not, even if he was bad, that is not the Joker. That's nothing like the Joker. Nothing he said is something that the Joker would say. All of it, the references to books like Lolita, the references to Zeno's paradoxes, the references to the paradox of evil, this kind of philosophical, none of it was anything the Joker would say. So if you say that, that makes me think that you don't know what you're talking about. So that's my bit on Lex Luthor, and that's a bit of a rant. There's a lot of people who say the Batman v Superman is kind of boring because of the pretentious philosophical musings. I mean, really, dude, really, is that? I mean, okay, I'll go on a kind of, you know, just straight out say this. I studied philosophy at university, and some of the things that came up in this film were things that we talk about in philosophy class, that lecturers were writing books on, that, you know, obviously it glossed over them because it's a movie, it can't go into a lecture about it, but essentially these were ideas that have been discussed since, you know, ancient Greek philosophers were walking around, you know. I just, it's bizarre to me that you can say it's pretentious. I don't think there's anything pretentious about it. Whether whether the question of if God exists and he's all powerful, how can there be evil in the world? I think that's a rather interesting question. The fact that they don't try and answer it because no one can answer it, you know, those kind of questions that come up in the movie are absolutely fine. They're thought-provoking and they're interesting, and they were thrown into the movie sparsely and at the right times. And I think as again, hats off to the writer, the way they wrote Lex Luthor, because he was philosophical, he was demented, he was evil, and he was always kind of throwing some kind of theological kind of ideas into the general narrative that I thought were very fun and interesting, and he did it in a funny way, and it was clever. So the philosophical side of it, I thought was very interesting. I thought that was a good on them. Brave move. And cinema audiences should have been happy that a big blockbuster movie like that, Batman v Superman itself, was actually attempting in some way to make you think. You'd think that you'd appreciate that. I don't know, whatever. Dream sequences, too many. Yeah, I agree with this. I believe the dream sequences should have been saved for the ultimate cut, because that was really, really for the fans. It didn't add to the narrative. I think they should have. I think they should have. I mean, with the Dawn of Justice thing, would the Trinity fight have been enough at the end to symbolize Dawn of Justice? Or would they have to have had, like, they could have just put one more cameo in, I don't know, Victor Stone playing at the football game could have done it, but like, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, the dream sequences because as I told you, I fell asleep. And the second time I watched the movie in the cinema and I tried to watch it with the trailers and everything, I fell asleep. It was too goddamn long and something had to go. And I can't think of anything. You know, I'm sure he was so proud of Direct because it was a beautiful sequence, all of that stuff in the desert, and he probably really didn't want to take it out. But to me, the film would have been more coherent if he had have added in all that stuff of Superman trying to find out about Batman, and I had have added that stuff of the stuff in the desert before to flesh out Lex Luthor's plan, and all of that. If you take out every kind of dream sequence in the movie, you could have had that, and you could have had a much more linear movie, and I think it would have been a better experience. Personally, I think it would have been. I think that would have been a bet. I think that would be the best version of the movie. Take out the dream sequences, put those in instead. But having said that, I think the dream sequence was very beautiful and very beautifully shot. Maybe you could have had it as a short movie or something like that before, like you know, put it in the cinema as like a trailer, like a really, really long kind of trailer for Batman v Superman. I think like as a short film that would have worked really, really well, and then added it to the ultimate cut the way he wanted it after. But those dream sequences, man, I'm sure that I know about Darkseid, I know about all of that kind of stuff. I'm sure it had the audience baffled. I think they could have left in the bit with the Flash coming through the portal, though. I think that could have been left in, and maybe done something a little bit shorter with the dream sequence. I don't know, but anyway, that's my view on the dream sequence. So as I said, you can see I am being fair. Where I see problems with the movie, I am being fair. So I'm not just like fanboying out and giving excuse after excuse for everything in the movie. Okay, the Martha scene. Now, this is one of the things. I'm going to say two things about the Martha scene. Now, there's two aspects to this. Now, one, we've got people who mock this scene, and they mock the very, very idea of it. I'm not going to go over again because it's so bloody obvious. I think only someone who is wanting to hate this movie or just is stupid. I don't know. You either want to hate this movie and you want to troll and you want to pile on, because if you don't understand this, especially people who say they're Batman fans, if you don't understand this scene and why Batman decides after hearing Superman say, save Martha, if you don't understand that scene, as a Batman fan, and I'm not even like the biggest Batman fan. Like he's one of my, he's as I said, apart from of the Trinity, he's probably the least favorite of the Trinity of mine. If I were really to look at it, I like Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman as my favorite superheroes, but he's probably just slightly the least. But even so, I'm not a huge comic reader of all of them. You know, I haven't read every single kind of incarnation of like Wonder Woman and Superman and Batman. I've read quite a bit, but you know, there are fans who are like crazy over Batman. They've read like everything, and they're saying, "Oh, wow, that Martha scene, I don't understand," or they claim to have read everything. I don't know if they actually have. Now, to me, I'm just like, it's very clear and obvious what the Martha scene is trying to do. Now, this is the second bit of this. I think it's very poorly executed, and I'm going to explain why it's poorly executed. Okay, so the first thing is clearly we all know, stop trolling, stop pretending you don't understand. Even if you didn't understand it while you were watching the movie, stop being so stubborn. You know exactly why the Martha scene, in terms of Batman stopping the fight because of the of what Superman said in that particular moment. You know exactly why that makes sense. The film sets it up perfectly in the beginning, even though I didn't want to see another scene of Batman's parents being killed, and I thought that scene in the beginning where Batman's parents are killed is so ridiculous, and what a redundant use of two great actors as well, just to play Martha and Thomas Wayne and get shot just like that. What a waste of that actor, you know. Unless they're going to do a storyline where Thomas Wayne in an alternate world becomes the Batman and she becomes the Joker, like in the Flashpoint Paradox. What a complete waste of those two actors to do just a little vignette of getting shot. Like, I'm not even going to get angry about that. But anyway, they set it up. You know, the last thing he hears after, his parents get shot is, Martha. You know, the father saying Martha. And we all know that Batman ultimately, if he could go back and do something about it so his parents don't get shot and he doesn't have to become Batman and he doesn't go into become this, vengeful, vengeful kind of avenger of the night. He would go back and, erase all of that and just live happily with his parents. He regrets that he wasn't able to do anything, and that's why he's put on the bat. And everyone knows this. I don't even know why I'm saying all of these words, because you know it, and you know that is the reason, and you're just being stubborn because maybe you didn't get it in the time in the cinema. And now you get it, but you don't want to admit you're wrong. You're wrong. It makes complete sense why Batman turned on it. Now, was it effectively, and why Batman stopped the fight? Now, was it effectively done as a scene? No. No, it was not effectively done as a scene. Too many dumb things about it. Why would Superman call his mother Martha? Who could, like, he loves his mother. He's got such a good, touching relationship with his mother. Why is he calling his mother Martha? It makes no sense. I mean, that's just another Zack Snyder thing. He just does these Zack Snydery things, and it's so annoying because he could make it perfectly fine and it all makes sense, but he just Snyders it. So you can see now I'm not a massive fan of Snyder's, oversights in filmmaking. So again, I'm being fair. I just think this film is, all in all, really great in some areas. Really great, and much more interesting filmmaking than Civil War. Okay, so the Martha, because you can talk about this. No one can talk about Civil War the way I'm talking about Batman v Superman. No one can talk about, because there's nothing of interest in it. There's nothing that bad and there's nothing that good. It's just there. You can't analyze it. There's nothing to analyze. You can analyze this movie because it's interesting and it has interesting themes and it has interesting decisions that it decides to make that are most often controversial and challenging to the viewer. You couldn't do this about Civil War because it doesn't warrant that kind of analysis, and that's the difference between this film and Civil War. Just to put a button on what I'm trying to say. But anyway, where were we? The Martha scene, we all know why it works, and as I said, but there's things about it that don't. Now, the problem is, I can see why he said save Martha rather than save my mother. I mean, yeah, it could have been save my mother in the script. But if it was save my mother in the script, and Batman kind of was like, what do you mean, mother? It wouldn't have had that impact. It wouldn't have had that impact. That, I mean, maybe if Pa Kent was still alive and he said, save my parents, then it could have, you know, you're killing my parents, you know. But again, you're killing Martha has just that, as a line, it has a really striking power. Now, I would have thought the really, really best way to have gone about this was, rather than, all in the ultimate cut this happens, rather than all of that time where Clark Kent is investigating the Batman, him, you know, that all of those scenes served to do was make Batman look like more of a badass. They didn't serve anything really significant in the movie. They didn't really tell you too much more about Clark Kent. He didn't get so many more lines. All his lines were kind of like, all his lines didn't tell you anything about him. They just were like other people either speaking to him and telling him about Batman, or it was, you know, they just didn't say much about him. So if he had have used that time to investigate Batman, and then when he heard and figured out Batman was Bruce Wayne, somehow he stumbled across the tragedy that had happened to Bruce Wayne, and he found out about the mother being called Martha, and then that's why at the end of the fight, Superman actually technically would have won the fight by using his brains, because he actually psychologically does it on purpose, saying save Martha, knowing that how that was going to affect Batman. Now that would have been good storytelling. That would have been ABC. So they could have used that time to set up something to make, you know, Superman look like he's not just this big, tough, powerful guy, but he's actually got some kind of character and brains to him. And I think that would have been a really, really good way to go, because Superman in the comics is not just some idiot. He's a guy who's, you know, he's got a lot of great power, but he's got a mind behind him as well. And it was the same thing, you know, when they just blow up the Senate. That's another terrible Snyder mistake. Stay with the moment just for a single moment. That could have been a Superman speech. Take out those dream sequences, put in a Superman speech where he defends himself to humanity. So again, I'm trying to be very, very fair to this movie, but again, you know, the big point here is, despite all this, there's great things about this movie, as I've pointed out. Batman Kills, another deconstruction of a character. Now, Batman killing in this movie is jarring. I think it doesn't really, the sense of it is kind of strange, because here's this guy who cares about, Superman killing all these people in this fight where he was trying to actually save the world, and he's killing himself. So again, I don't know how to defend the Batman killing. I honestly don't. And it's not because that I don't think Batman should be able to kill in movies, but in this specific movie, it can't be justifiable, because once Batman kills, then it takes away from his motivation to want to fight Superman, who he thought had done all this great destruction and killed so many people. So again, although I like the idea of this is an old Batman who's gone over the edge and has become more ruthless, as soon as he crosses that line, he, as a person, has no credibility in criticizing Superman. However, was it so bad, him killing, that I stopped enjoying the movie? No. So again, I'm gonna say I agree with guys who say Batman shouldn't have killed. I don't think Batman should have killed, considering the story they were trying to tell. But it wasn't so jarring, and I enjoyed most aspects of the Batman character. I loved what they did in terms of making Bruce Wayne a bit more like the James Bond. I'd never seen that before. I think Ben Affleck, for the most part, although he didn't do anything, and this is what I was going to say, like this scene alone from, I'm going to show you a scene now, because I was setting this up. Ain't no way Ben Affleck's better than Christian Bale. I don't even think he's better than Michael Keaton. I think he's about on par with Michael Keaton. Although Michael Keaton didn't get to show off a lot of his range. But there are scenes that, there was not one scene that wasn't, fight choreography in Batman v Superman that impressed me so much about this new Batman. All the scenes that impressed me about this new Batman were all fight choreography, or some other kind of, like when he crawled up into the corner, like as if he was a bat, or when Bruce Wayne was flying on the, as a child, he'd fallen down the well and he's flying on the wings of the bat. All of the stuff about Batman that I liked was the kind of, the visual and the fight choreography. Ben Affleck's was serviceable as the kind of vessel that kind of the face of these great visual and fight spectacles that Batman was in. But yeah, like, I mean, the subtlety and nuance of Christian Bale in Batman Begins, no way. It blows Ben Affleck out the water. And just look at this scene. Sorry, you're trying to tell me, the nerd man, on with enough prep time, and you don't even have the class. No, you're trying to tell me that Ben Affleck did anything like that as a scene in Batman v Superman? What Christian Bale did there was just, he took us through so many different aspects and sides of the Batman and Bruce Wayne character that, this new James Bond Batman is cool and everything, but essentially the acting is, it's Ben Affleck's best acting, but Ben Affleck's best acting is, it's average, dude. I don't know what to say. It's above average. like Ben Affleck's best acting on his, if he's giving everything he's got 170%, he still isn't as good as certain actors like Christian Bale or Caprio or any of those guys. So the intro of the Justice League is the last thing that I'm going to talk about. So I was very impressed by Ben Affleck, by the way. Don't get me wrong, he was really, really good. Intro to the Justice League, and the film is overstuffed with characters. This is the last critique of the movie. That I found has been the general critique of Batman v Superman. What can I say about the intro of the Justice League? I mean, what the hell do you want anyway? How did that ruin the movie for you? They introduced the Justice League on a video because that's what Lex Luthor had. He'd gone. I thought it was realistic. That's what I thought. I thought actually, that's kind of actually generally realistic. That's how, rather than have some kind of weird, like, spectacular thing where they bump into the Flash, maybe they could have made a cool post-credit scene with the Flash instead of doing those videos and then just taken that scene out. But generally speaking, it didn't bother me. It wasn't a scene that I thought was good. It wasn't a scene that I thought was bad. I didn't see how it could be, how people could hate it so much that they're gonna bring it up like, oh, this movie was overstuffed with characters because they did these files. Oh, you won't believe how they introduced the Flash. It was just on a file and who cares? I mean, who cares? It was such a little part of the film. So no. Whatever. And Doomsday and the death of Superman. Now, this is a major problem I have with the movie. Now, I got why he did it. Ballsy as hell. Really, really ballsy. But in hindsight, after thinking about it for quite a while, it was very, very silly and short-sighted of them to kill Superman in this movie. Very, very bad idea. Especially if you're going to take away Clark Kent as well. I think the way the creature looked, they could have just reshot like certain things and just said that was Parasite instead. And nobody would have even minded, because that's kind of like what Parasite looks like. They could have got Scoot McNairy and just like thrown him into that stuff on the Kryptonian ship and mixed him with Zod and Lex and just created, Parasite instead. And that would have been more than enough to take on, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Terrible idea to kill off Superman, because they've killed off Superman and Clark Kent, and we all know Superman's going to come back. But how are people going to buy the Clark Kent secret identity, or are we not going to have Clark Kent anymore? It's just going to be Superman. There's no Clark Kent in this world anymore. Then you rip away the humanity of Superman. When he gets his solo movie, Clark Kent is the heart of Superman. So I thought that was a really, really bad idea. So then I'm just